let's finally get to risk number one, which is independent America.
Yeah.
You mentioned this possibility in your 2015 book, Superpower, as a possible outcome for an America that kind of looks within and builds itself back up and could possibly even lead by example.
Yes.
And that's the positive way of looking at it. You also mentioned that it's a shift away from liberal values toward the core American value of independence, right, and autonomy, right. I sense that your views might have evolved over time about this possibility of an American foreign policy looking more as an independent one. Whatever the case, might it not be so bad after all? I mean, is there an upside? And then on the other side of the coin, what's the worst case scenario?
There is a potential upside, absolutely. And the potential upside is largely for the US, right? I mean, the reason why I never liked independent America, but nonetheless, I eventually recommended it. It was my least favorite of my options for the US in foreign policy.
Least bad.
Least favorite, but in some ways least bad, because I believed in a world where Americans increasingly were discontented with globalization, were discontented with the global share for all, and in a world that was becoming more G0-like because of China, Russia, the Middle East, Europe getting weaker, Russia, China moving in a different direction, Middle East falling apart, that I thought that independent America was the foreign policy that we were most likely to be able to articulate and execute on.
Sure.
Where we've seen under Obama, Obama can articulate indispensability, but cannot execute on it. And that's not purely his fault.
Was that Moneyball? Was that the middle road?
I think that Obama was talking a great game of all of these things that, Assad must go and Russia must leave Ukraine, and, we're gonna build the Middle East after the Arab Spring and democracy is gonna bloom, and of course none of it worked.
So he wanted to be indispensable.
He wanted to be indispensable, and he was incapable of doing it, and the people weren't behind him, and the international environment was too hard. So, the funny thing is a lot of what Trump says on foreign policy, like, is NATO really fit for purpose if they don't want to pay for it? That's something we can execute on, And the idea that the United States, the pivot to Asia is, ultimately not sustainable because China is going to be a lot larger is also something I get. Here's the problem with Trump.
Here's the worst case scenario.
Well, it's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is war. But the likely scenario is that Trump has a problem leading by example. That he does all of the international independent America stuff, but what's critical for independent America working is that other countries see that the United States is such a model as a country itself that it aspires to be like the US. Well, that implies a really professional and competent cabinet. And he has appointed some people that is true. He's appointed some that are literally the worst and most unfit that have ever been in these positions. It implies that a United States which internally celebrates its diversity, celebrates all of the values that America was truly made great by. And that wasn't about, let's disparage, sort of Mexican immigrants as rapists and murderers. It's not about, we think the Muslims have a problem in terms of their religion. America was the great melting pot. That Trump is not leading by example in that regard. And the conflict of interest that we see through keeping the Trump organization, that feels more like South Korea or sort of even China than it feels like the United States, which was entrepreneurship and free market, not your companies have to be patriotic and so does your media. So I worry that even though he has managed to tap into a deep-seated populism with very legitimate reasons behind it on America's role in the world, that his ability to get it done in the US is an open question. But final point on this, let's keep in mind that he does have a Republican House and Senate, and he is clearly someone that wants to use his bully pulpit to create jobs. Now, if we get a big infrastructure bill and we reduce corporate taxation and he gets corporates to put a lot of jobs in the US, even though he himself is a very damaged leader, it could well be that America as an economy is much more attractive going forward. And if that's true, ultimately the US-China relationship won't deteriorate so much because the Chinese will be pragmatic and say, hey, you got to bet on these guys.
Right.
But there's a lot of risk around that. That's the point.